So here recording is started and everything is started. Uh, Once again, good afternoon and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. If you have any question during the webinar, feel free to use Q&A panel to raise your question. Whenever I'll get time, I would answer those questions. If we would not able to answer those questions today in the webinar, we will write follow-up recap blog of the webinar, and your question would be answered in that. So that is one. Second is that this webinar is brought to you by Infragistics, Infragistics is a company, is a company which creates like developer tools. We have just a minute. Yeah, so I hope now screen should be clear to you. Okay, great. So welcome to Getting Started with ASP.NET MVC webinar, which is brought to you by Infragistics. We are a developer-based company. We have tools for if you want to create, to improve your productivity, and we have developer tools for ASP.NET MVC, jQuery, Android, Windows. We have Indigo Studio, which helps you to, prototype your application, etc. So I strongly recommend you to go and check infragistics.com, where you will find more information. So agenda of today webinar is very simple. In very beginning, I want to make it very upfront clear that today webinar is targeting to the developers who want to start with ASP.NET MVC. We are going to cover all the basic component of MVC, which is required for you to get it started with ASP.NET MVC. So in today's webinar, we are going to cover controllers, views, models, view bag, view data, temp data, different kind of views. Then we'll see child action and partial views. We'll talk about areas, database first approach, and if time permits, we will even look into code first approach and client-side libraries like jQuery and Ignite UI. So this is the agenda of today's webinar. During the webinar, if you want to share your experience on Twitter or Facebook, feel free to do that using the hashtag Infragistics or Infragistics. Tag the Twitter handle of Infragistics. Maybe few of you will have a chance to win some goodies from us, and that could be a good Diwali gift for you. So feel free to share your experience about a webinar, or during the webinar or after the webinar on Twitter or on Facebook using the hashtag which is on your screen, which is Infragistics, and you may want to tag the Infragistics Twitter handle as well. So this is the giveaway for today's webinar. This is me, your host for today's webinar. My name is Dhananjay Kumar. I work as developer evangelist for Infragistics. I'm a 6 times Microsoft MVP, and you can reach me on Twitter at debug_mode. And later I'll share my Infragistics email address with you as well. Well, so all said and done, let's start let's start talking about the real topic of the webinar, which is getting started with the MVC. And I'm sure that all of you must be knowing what is MVC. MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. Model has its own purpose, View has its own purpose, Controller has its own purpose. And ASP.NET MVC is a web technology framework from Microsoft, which follows MVC architecture and allow us to create a web application. So you see that in ASP.NET MVC, model, view, and controller talks to each other. in this manner. So controller talk to model to create the application, to get the application data and pass it to view. View also talks to model, and controller may return the view to the user. Don't worry about that if you're not getting it. We will cover that in the detail later during the webinar. So essentially ASP.NET MVC is a is a technology given to you by Microsoft, which follows MVC architecture, and it allows us to create a robust and scalable and search engine optimized web application. These are the few features of ASP.NET MVC, that it has the clean separation of concerns, like your data, your application data and business logic is part of model. Your controller contains deals with incoming request and all, and view renders the HTML. So it has a very clean separation of concern. Like if you see ASP.NET, what you do, you actually write code on the click event of a button. So they are very tightly coupled. Like you write all the code on default.aspx.cs. So your view and your code behind are very much tightly coupled to each other, which is not in the case here. Here you have your view, which deals with the rendering HTML. You have model, which contains your application data, and controller deals with other stuff like handling user request. The biggest, since it is having a clean separation of concern, it enables us to support test-driven development. If you have not done test-driven development, test-driven development, what we do, we write unit tests for each and every component we are developing. Since your business logic, which is inside your model, does not have any dependency on the view, since your business logic is not tightly coupled with the view, you can separately do the testing, unit testing of your business logics, and hence it makes your MVC application highly supportive for test-driven development. So that is advantage 2. Advantage 3 is that it is very easy to integrate client-side libraries like JavaScript, jQuery, and Ignite UI with ASP.NET MVC. I'm sure you must have heard about JavaScript, jQuery. Ignite UI is Infragistics jQuery library, and you may want to check it out. That it helps you a lot in creating, creating faster ASP.NET MVC application. It has grid, it has all those controls which you can think, which you may need in your business rich internet application, and you can use that. So it is very, since it is again jQuery library, it is very easy to integrate any client-side library in ASP.NET MVC. That is advantage 3. In ASP.NET MVC, the developer has a full control over the rendered HTML. Like in ASP.NET, if you see that it creates a lot of extra markup. It gives ID, which you don't know, is dynamically assign ID to your rows and other controls, which does not happen in ASP.NET MVC. Hence developer has full control over rendered HTML. ASP.NET MVC applications are very much optimized for search engine, because because it is stateless in the nature, and you have control over the URL. There's a URL routing which you can do to create highly optimized web applications for search engines. So these are the few features of ASP.NET MVC, and last but not least, of course, these features are supported in ASP.NET also, but it has a membership provider, like you have inbuilt support for authentication, authorization, configuration, compilation. ASP.NET MVC 5 supports ASP.NET Identity 2, which helps you to create role-based authentication and authorization, which we may not able to cover today, but probably we will do a complete webinar on that sometime later. So these are some features of ASP.NET MVC, and these features makes ASP.NET MVC apart from ASP.NET. Let us come back and now start coding. And before we code, let us start with controller. What is controller? So controller does all the action in MVC. It handles user interaction or inputs. It passes user data to model and selects a view to render on the UI. So controller is the guy which takes the user input. When you render a web application created using MVC, actually you hit a controller, and then controller, according to input, it does many tasks, like it can redirect you a UI, it can return you a JSON, it can return you other media types like PDF. It pass data to model, it fetches data to model and pass it to view. So all these tasks are done by controller, and hence controller is one of the most important component of MVC. So here you see that what is controller. A controller is a class. Basically, it is simply a C# class. It contains one or more methods called actions. So since it is a class, it can contain methods, and methods of controller are known as actions, and each action can be accessed via the URL. An action can return a simple string or a selected view to the UI. Since actions are a methods, right, and each method has a method can have a return type. So action can return either a simple string, it can return JSON, or it can return a view to the user. Action takes all browser requests or user inputs. As we talked before, actions are, you can access an action using the URL in the browser. Hence, all the browser requests come to action and all the user inputs come to action. What other work controller does, it retrieves data from the model. So inside the action, you write a code to retrieve data from the model and database, pass it to view, and then return the view to render the data to in the client browser. So controller is very, very important. And last but not least, it selects the view to be rendered on the UI. So these are the main feature of controller, or rather I'll say main work of controller. And just we'll see that how we can create a controller very. So here you see that on your screen that what controller does, it takes the user action, then it talks to model, then it select the view, and then it renders the view to the UI. Or it may even return a JSON, or it may even return simple string, which we'll see later in the demo. So this is controller for you. If you have any question for controller, you can use Q&A panel to ask your question. I'll answer you later. Now let us go and see some demo on the controller. Let us launch Visual Studio. Well, so here you see that what I'm doing, I have launched Visual Studio 2015. You can use any Visual Studio of your choice, like 2013 or 15 or 12. There could be some differences here and there while creating the project, but more or less it is same. I'm going here and saying, hey, create a new project for me. For that, I clicked on new project, then I'm selecting web. And inside the web, I'm selecting ASP.NET Web Application option. Once that is selected, I'll go here and I'll give a name to this IG Webinar app. I'm giving a name to my application, and I'll browse it to, let us say, desktop. So here I'm creating a ASP.NET Web Application in the web, from the web tab. I'll go and click on OK. And here you see that I have different templates available. I'll go and say that, hey, I want to create an MVC from ASP.NET 4.5. What I'm doing, I'm selecting MVC, which you can see on your screen. Okay, and this side is very important, which you see on your screen, the right side. In the right side, you have something called authentication. Click on the authentication, and here you see that by default, ASP.NET MVC provides you different kind of authentication, which you can see on your screen, like individual user accounts or no authentication and Windows authentication, etc. For this demo, to keep it simple, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that no authentication, and I'll click on OK. So I selected no authentication and clicking on OK. Then after, it is asking me that whether in the below of the authentication, you see that Microsoft Azure option is there. It is asking me that whether I want to host this application on the cloud. Right now I'm selecting the option that I don't want to host it into the cloud. So this is great. I left it as it is. Here MVC is selected. I don't want to add a unit test project. So again, I'm not checking this checkbox. I have left it unchecked. And let us go ahead and click on OK. It will create an MVC application for us where authentication is no authentication, and we'll start adding controller in that. So let me go and click on OK to create application, and here it is creating. So here we see that ASP.NET application has been created for us. Let us go and examine the Solution Explorer and the project structure. And here you see in the project, you have a folder called controller. So all the controllers will go inside controller folder. Then you can see you have a folder called views. And inside view folder, you will have subfolders corresponding to a controller. So I have a home controller here. That is why I have a home folder over here. Makes sense? And inside this home folder, we will have different views. Then I have a model folder. Right now, there is no model added here. Then we have a scripts folder. All the scripts will be there, as we talked in the beginning, that it can support any client-side script. So if you have any client-side script, we can add them in the scripts folder. Then the content contains all the CSS and content which is required for your application. Then you have app data and app start. Let us go and check the app start folder. Inside app start folder, you have three classes. Bundle config.cs, which is mainly used. Bundle config.cs is mainly used to do the bundling and minification. Then route config.cs. In this class, you configure the route, which we'll cover later. So this is your project structure. If you want to add a controller, you should be adding that controller inside the controller folder. And let us start with adding a controller. To add a controller, what we'll do, we'll right click on the controllers folder and say that, hey, add a new controller for me. So what I have done, right clicked on the controller folder, add, and then the controllers here. I select the controller. And it is giving many options like MVC5 controller empty, then MVC5 controller with rewrite actions, MVC5 controller with views using EF, and then the web API controllers. I'll go ahead and check, use the empty controller because we want to code everything from the scratch. Later in the webinar, I'll show you that how to work with the other two options. So let us go ahead and select first one, which is MVC5 controller empty, and click on add. It will ask us to give a name. I'm giving the name as test controller. So here you see that I have given the name test controller and click on add. It has added a controller to me, which you can see on its screen. And by default, it has a method called index return view. What I'm going to do, I'm going to comment that and we'll start adding our own methods. Great. So let us go ahead, and what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add an action. As I told you that controller is a class. So this is a class, a test controller, which inherits test controller class inherits the controller base class. And any method inside this class is known as action. And an action can return a string, it can return a JSON, it can return another view, it can redirect to another action, or so on. What I'm going to do, I'll go and create a new action here. Let us say called public string index. And then I'll say that, hey, return, hey, I am index of test controller. So here you see that we have added an action called index, and which is returning a string, and return type of that index is a string. Let us very quickly go and add one more. Let us very quickly go and add one more action, and I'm calling that action as public string greet. Hey, greetings. Hey, I am greet of test controller. And as of now, both of these action are returning simple string. Well, so what I have done, I have created a controller and then I have added two actions, index and greet. Now we want to access this. So let us go ahead and run your application. To run the application, press F5 and it will launch application in your default browser. So here you see that it is launching the application, and I got something here like ASP.NET or something on the screen. Great, right? Now this is actually home controller. You remember in your project you had a home controller by default created for you. So this is home controller. If you don't give any name if you don't specify any controller and action name in the browser, actually it renders the default route. I'll show you in a bit what is default route, but if you don't mention anything, it go to the default route. Since we want to access test controller, what we need to do, we need to take the base URL /test and then slash the action name. So here is the base URL. I'll go here and say /test. You remember we gave the controller name as test and then slash index. You see what I'm doing here, base URL, then the controller name, and then the action name. If I want to access greet action, I'll give /test/greet. I'll go here and press enter, and you see on your screen that I'm getting, hey, I'm index of test controller. So what we have done, we just created a controller with the action which is returning a string. If you want to access greet controller action, what you need to do, go in your browser and press greet. As like this, you see a test is a controller name, and then again greet is your action name. And when you append that and press enter, here you see that you are getting the output, hey, I'm greet of the test controller. Great. So in this way, when you create a controller, how you can access that base URL / the controller name and then the action name, and you can pass parameter to actions also, which I'll show you later. Let me show you something very interesting here. I'll go and here you see that I'm not giving anything after the controller name, which you see on your screen. I'm just saying localhost and then the base URL and then /test. When I try to access this particular URL, it will go and fetch the index action, because by default if you don't provide any action name, the route is configured for you to return the index action. That's why it is returning you index. If you want, you can change it. So in this way you can see that how you can create an action, how you can create a controller which is returning a string. Let us move ahead and see other options. Let us say you want to return a JSON data, and to return the JSON data in the greet, what I'm going to do, I'll go here and let us say I want to return a JSON data. For that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a class very quickly. And the class is, let us say, a product class which I'm creating here. Now I'm going to show you that how you can return a JSON data from a controller action. Here you see that I have created a very simple class called product in the same controller class, in the same file of the controller class, and it got 3 properties. And what I'm going to do, that I'm going to add one more action. And as you see on your screen, what I'm doing, line number 28, I have added a new action called get data. So in line number 28, I have added a new action called get data. Then in line number 30 to 35, I'm creating a new object of product class. Then what I'm doing in line number 36, I'm creating a JSON, passing the object, and then I'm saying that, hey, allow the JSON request for this method, and then I'm returning the JSON data. So here I had created a action inside the controller, which is returning JSON. We just saw in the previous demo that we created an action which was returning, which was returning a string. Right now we see that this particular action is returning the JSON data. So let us go ahead and run this again, and we'll see that in the browser, for test/get data, we do have the JSON return. So here we go, test/get data. You see it is returning the JSON here. So here the URL get data, and then it is returning the JSON over here. So we just saw that how we can return JSON from a MVC controller as well. Now let us go ahead and see that if we need to pass some parameter to the action, how we can pass that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and modify the greet action. In the greet action, what I'm doing here, you see that in the greet action, what I'm saying that, hey, pass two parameters, line number 22 I'm talking here. Okay, and I'm saying that, hey, pass two parameters, one is name and another is number of times equal to 1. Then for the security region, I'm taking http utility.html in code such that malicious JavaScript cannot make requests to this action. And then I'm returning hello name number times is number times. I'm just reading the data from input parameters and returning them back as a string. So here you see that a greet method, a greet action has been modified to take two input parameters. Now let us go ahead and run this application and see what happens. So here you see that so I'll go here and I'll say test. Test is returning the index controller. Great. Now we need to call the greet action. So how we can call, we'll say that greet, and then we need to pass two input parameter to this, and those two input parameter can be passed using the query parameter. I'll go ahead and say that, hey, name equal to JSON and then the number times equal to 4. So these are the two input parameters you remember be given to greet action, and we are passing that using the query parameter. And here you see that I'm getting the output here, hello JSON, number of times is 4, and I'm passing this input parameter to action method using the query parameter. All of us are aware of what is query parameter, and it is not the great. I mean, it is okay, but we have better way to pass the query parameter, pass the input parameter to action rather than query parameter. And how we can do that? Let us go ahead and modify the class again, the method which we just written. Here I'll go, and instead of number of times, I'll call this as ID. Okay, so I'm calling this particular method as ID, and I'll go here and say that, hey, number of times is this ID. And here you see that I just renamed the variable here from number of times to ID and doing exactly the same stuff. Now I'll go and run this application again. Now I can go and say test greet, and let us say 5, and then for ID I don't need to pass the query parameter. I can just append that to the URL, but of course for the name I need to pass the query parameter. Now I can call this, you see here, like this. So what's happening is that if I'm using a parameter name as ID, I don't need to necessarily pass that as a query parameter. I can pass that just like a normal URL, and of course for the name I need to pass it as a query parameter. And here I'm getting the output. Now there is a way to work around this also. If you don't want to pass it in query parameter and you always want this name to go as the URL, part of the URL, you can very much do that. That is requirement 2. Requirement 1 is that why we don't have to pass ID as a query parameter, it is taking by default, and why index is coming by default as the action of a particular controller. And answer of these things are here in the route mapping. If I go here to my application and go to the app start folder, inside the app start folder, there is something called route config.cs. Double click that, and here you can find that the route which has been added to your application as a default route, I'm talking about line number 16 to line number 19, is saying that your URL format should be controller name, then action name, then ID. So ID goes by default. Then it says that the by default, your default controller is home, your default action is index, and ID is optional. So that is why on the base URL, when we don't run anything, not invoke the URL of a particular controller and particular action, we are getting actually home and the index. And here you can see that home controller and the index method. If you go to the view of this index method, here you can see that these code are there. So this is the reason why you are getting the home and index as the default of your application. Now, if you want to add name as also the in the route, the name parameter also in the route, you can very much do that. Go to the route config.cs, and here you can register a new route. I'm again inside the route config.cs, and what I'm saying that here, register a new route, give it a name hello, and it will take a controller name, action name, and then it will take a name and ID. So what I have done here in line number 24, I have created a route which takes name as an input parameter as well. Now if we go ahead and run this application, we don't have to use a query parameter. We can go and say greet, and let us say just we can pass JSON and 7, and here you see that we are able to fetch the input parameter in the URL by we just added route which is accepting name as input parameter as well. So this is all about controller. Let us go to the view and see how it works. So far we have seen that controller is returning a string, controller is returning JSON, how controller is taking input parameter. But majority of the time you'll find controller is working with view very closely. Controller returns view. So let us go ahead and create a view. Let us go ahead and start working with view. But before that, I want to discuss some theoretical concept of view. So what view does, views are the components that display the application's user interface. Simple, it is just user interface. Keep in mind, it does not take the user input. User input routes via the controller. It renders user interface. It contains markup to be rendered with the view engine. There are two kinds of view engine in MVC, Razor and ASPX engine. So whenever you find .cs HTML, that is the Razor engine, and majority of the time we'll be using that. Then controller may returns view. So this you need to keep in mind that controller may returns view, as we saw that controller may return JSON, controller may return a string, it may redirect to another action, etc. So it may return view also. View renders data from the model returned by the controller, and controller can send data to the view. So this is the characteristics of view, and let us go ahead and see how view works. So what controller does, it fetches data from the model, application data on certain business logic from the model, and pass that data to the view. We'll see later what are the different ways to pass the data. And then view gets the render using one of the view engine, does not contain any business logic. View does not contain any business logic, that you need to keep in mind. So this is how view works. Let us go back to Visual Studio and see some demo on view. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a view. So here I have test controller. In the test controller, I had this index action, which you see just created. What I'm going to do, rather than returning a string, I will say that, hey, return action result from me. Okay, so it will return an action result, and in the action result, we'll say that, hey, return a view for me. So here you see that we have modified the index action in line number 17 to line number 20 in the test controller, and we are saying that, hey, index action will return a view. Now to add a view, what you need to do, right click on your action and say, hey, add a view. So right click on the action and say add a view. When you select that, it has many options for the templates. You see the options are create, delete, details, edit, empty, without model, list. What we are going to use, we are going to use empty without model. Okay, and there's a concept of partial views which we'll cover later. So go ahead and create a view by choosing empty without model and click on add. So here you see that we just created a view which is saying that index. We can say that, hey, index of test controller. Great. Before I go ahead and run this application, I wanted to show you something. You see that inside the views folder in the project, a folder for test has been added. And since we have created so far only one view, that is index.chhtml, is the part of the test subfolder of the views folder. So it mapped on the folder basis. If you are creating a view for action called DJ, the view would be dj.cshtml, like that. Great. So now let us go and run this. We should be able to get this view there. And here you see that that we are getting that index of test controller, which is index method is index action is now actually rendering a view, not a normal string. So in this way, you can create a view, and I'll further show you a detail of the view in the webinar as well. Great. So far we have learned about controller, we have learned about view. Now let us go ahead and see how model works. But before that, some theoretical concept of model. So model is a class which represents the problem domain. Model implements logic for the application data. So all your business logic would be part of your model. It represents the problem domain. These are the few characteristics of model. Model, like controller, model is also a class. It is accessible to both the view and the controller. Views renders data from the model. Controller can pass data from model to the view. Model class contain the application logic. This is very important. All your logic would be part of your model. Model is a place of the ORM or data access framework. So if you use entity framework or link you to SQL, other ORM in your MVC application, those will be part of the model. So model is mainly the application data. It is the domain of your application. It contains the business logic, application data, and controller talks to model, and it then sends the data back to the view, which gets rendered to the user in their browser. So mainly model contains ORM, application data logic, and business logic. So very quickly, let us go ahead and create a model. Let us see a model demo, which should be very simple actually. So what I'm going to do here that what I'm going to do here is that to create a model, go to the Visual Studio and say that, hey, again, to create a model, you should put the model inside the models folder. I'll right click on the models folder and say that add a new class. And I'm adding a new class, and I'm calling that class as, let us say, product. So here I have added a new class called product.cs. Makes sense? and I'll say that add. So here a new class is added called product.cs. Okay, and inside this class, what I'm going to do, I'll go to the test controller.cs. We already had a product class here, so I'll take it here. And okay, so what I'm going to do in the product.cs, I'm having these properties, ID, name, and price, which you can see on your screen. Okay, so we have this public integer ID, public string name, public interval price, and we need to use this. Inside the action. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create one more action called product data in the test controller. So let us go to the test controller here, and let me just go and just resolve it because it is now part of the model. So I'll go here and say that, hey, add a new action for me, which you can see on a screen. What I'm doing here in line number 43, I'm creating a new action called product data, where I'm creating a list of products and then adding the products to that. So here you can see on your screen in line number 46 to 58, 59, I'm creating list of products. And then what I'm doing in the view, I'm passing that list of products, which you can see in line number 60. That is great. Now what I'll do here, I'll go here, compile the project to see that if everything is fine. So after a successful rebuild, again, I'll right click on the action which we just created, that is product data. Okay, so right click there and say add view. So select add view. You'll be asked to give the view name and template. What I'm going to do, this time I'm going to use the template of list. We want to display the data. So what I have selected template from the template list, we want to display some data there. From the model class product. So here I have done two things. I'm selecting the template for the list and then saying that use the model class product. And as we have been talking since beginning, view can directly talk to model. So here I'm selecting product and then I'll say click add. And here you see that already a lot of code has been created in product data.ch.html. What I'm going to do, I'm saying that product data, product for test controller. Great, and then I'll put some line here. And here you see that we already, since we have selected a template, what it is doing, it is displaying the name. How it is displaying the name? In top, you see that name and price of the product. In the top, you see that it is adding the namespace for the product as a model in line number 1. Then what it is doing, it is iterating to the model, where item in model, which is line number 23. And then just displaying them as item.name, item.price. You can notice here that your intelligence should work here, item.name and item.price. And now when you go and run this application, it should be able to show you the result from that product list which we created inside the controller. And here you go. So it is showing you butter and milk. Of course, you can create, you can edit, delete, etc. So it will not work right now because we have not created view and actions for that. But this is the way you can connect a view to the model. And again, this was very, very simple. All the scaffolding options and etc. are available. So this was all about view. Let us quickly go to, it was all about model. Now let us quickly go to the demo PPT again. Great. Now, when you, so far, my friends, I have completed controller, basic of controller, basic of view, basic of model, advantage of ASP.NET MVC, and I hope it is useful when you will start working with ASP.NET MVC. Next, what I'm going to do, which is very important concept, and I find people use it very extensively, and entry-level developers are very confused that how to pass data in ASP.NET MVC. So you may have a requirement to pass data in 3 scenarios. Like scenario 1, you may want to pass data from controller to view. You may want to pass data from one action to another action. You may want to pass data from one controller to another controller. In ASP.NET MVC, you have three options to pass data: view bag, view data, and temp data. So view bag is the dynamic object to pass data from controller to view. Dynamic is a type in C#4 got introduced. View data and view bag performs exactly the same task with certain differences, that like view bag is a dynamic type, whereas view data is a dictionary object. Since view bag is a dynamic object, you can access the properties using the dot, whereas since view data is a dictionary or is a dictionary, you have to access it using the key value pair. So view bag and view data are used to pass data from controller to view, whereas temp data is used to pass data from one controller to another controller, or one control action to another action, or in the same controller or in other controller. So here you see that if you want to pass data from controller to view, you have two options. You can use view data or you can use view bag, any one of them. So let us very quickly do a demo on view data and view bag, and then I'll come back to you on the same. So here I am. Great. So let me start doing a data, and what I'm going to do, I will just quickly go ahead and add a new controller. Just to show you, I'll say that, hey, add a new controller, and I'll call this controller name again the empty, and let me call it as that data controller. Okay, so I have added a new controller called data controller, and I have a method called index. I want to pass a data from this index action to the view. What I can do, I can say, hey, view bag dot, let us say, name equal to. So you see what I'm doing here. I'm using view bag to pass the data here. So since view bag is a dynamic object, I can attach the data using the name as the property of the object, and now I can access this view bag dot name on the view. Let's go ahead and add a view. Right click, add a view, select the empty and say add, and here you see that I have that. Now to access that, what I'll do, I'll go here and access that data. Instead of index, let us say we want to say view bag dot, and the object name which we gave was the name. So I can just come here and access view bag dot name. So in this way, using the view bag, you can pass data from controller to view. Let us go ahead and run this, and the controller name is data. So here you see on your screen, you can see that we are able to read the name which was passed using the view bag from controller to view. So this is the one way you can pass data. Another way you can pass data from controller to view using the view data, and for that it's super simple again. Let us go back to our data controller. I'll just comment this line and say that, hey, I want to use view data and name, and let us say, so here you see that since view data is a dictionary object, we can assign any value to that using key value pair. I'm creating a key called name and then assigning JSON views, and then I can access this on the view like this. So let us go to the view again here and say that, hey, I want to access you, and to access it, you'll be accessing it like this, @view data and the property which is name. Super simple. Again, we go ahead and run this. We should be able to get the expected output. So in this way, you can pass data from controller to view using either view bag or the view data. So let us go back to our presentation again. So these are the basic difference between view data and view bag. It is view data is a type of view data dictionary class, whereas the view bag is the dynamic type. Data can be passed in form of key value pair in the view data. Data is passed in term of property object. in view data, to avoid exception, you have to do the null checking. In view bag, you don't have to do the null checking. Life of view data is restricted to the current request and becomes null on redirection. Same goes with the view bag. View data is property. So these are the differences which you can read later. I'll share the PPT with you. Next is the temp data. What temp data does, it passes data from one controller to another controller, or from one HTTP request to next HTTP request, to be very technical, or from one action to another action. After the current request, value of temp data gets null. So if you want to pass data from one action to another action, you'll be using temp data. What temp data does, temp data is used to pass data from one HTTP request to the next HTTP request. In other words, temp data is used to pass data from one controller to another controller, or action to another action. Temp data is property of base controller class. Temp data stores data in session object. Temp data is a temp data dictionary. Temp is to read data, you need to do the typecasting and null checking. And temp data works with HTTP code like 302 and 303. So let us very quickly go ahead and do a demo of temp data before we move further. What I'm going to do here in the index method, what I have done, so I'll go to the data controller class here. I have this index method. What I'm going to do, I created a temp data called data1, and I'm from the different action. I have assigned some value to that. And as you see that this time, this action is not returning a view, rather it is redirecting to another action called read. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'll have to create another action called read below, which I'm creating in the same controller. I can create that in another controller as well. And this is returning a string. And here you see that I'm doing the typecasting to read the data from temp data, line number 21, and then returning that. So again, summarizing what I'm doing, index method is redirecting to another action called read in the same controller, and setting the value of temp data as data1. In the next request, in the read, what we are doing, we are reading that using the typecasting and again returning that as a string. So super simple. I go ahead and run this. You can see the output for the temp data as well. So we'll go here and say data, and here you see that I'm getting the output. I have redirected to read, and I'm getting the output here. I'm from the different action. So this is sorry. So this is how you can work with view data, view bag, and temp data. Keep in mind, when you need to pass data from controller to view, use one of view bag or view data. View bag is more prominent because you don't have to do the null checking, and you can attach the data as a property. Temp data is used to pass data from one to the next HTTP request, or from one action to another action, or from one controller to action of another controller. So this is about how you can pass data in MVC application. Great. So we have done the temp data. Now let us see that what are the different types of views in ASP.NET MVC. In ASP.NET MVC, you have two types of views: dynamic views and strongly typed views. In strongly typed views, the view which we just created, where your view is very much integrated with your model class, or a strongly typed model class, it is a strongly typed view. Whereas the dynamic views is not integrated with your model. So just it's not much difference, but let us just see a quick demo on both of them. So what I'm going to do here, I am going to create a new action. So here you see that I'll go in the data class, and in the data class, what I'm going to do, in the data class, I'm going to create a new action, and the action name is simple product data dynamic. Okay, and as just we saw that what we can do, we can pass this data as a view bag also to the products. You see here, I'm attaching this list of product which I created in line number 28 to the view bag, and then I can pass this. So I'll go here and say that, hey, add a view, I have added a view, again selecting that mtb.model and adding it here. Now what I can do, I can use that using the view bag very simply. I'll go here and say that, hey, product, that view bag.products, iterate me inside the view bag.products, and then print the a.name and a.price. Keep in mind that if you are using the view bag or the dynamic view, your IntelliSense will not work. You see that here my IntelliSense is not working. I need to I'll have to know in advance what is the method name. IntelliSense is not working here, and I'll say that product data dynamic here, and you see that we are passing the data using the view bag. And this is another example of dynamic view. So when you pass data to your view using view data or view bag, that is actually one kind of dynamic view. So here you see on your screen that you are getting the output butter and milk, which is good. Next, let us go ahead and see that what is the another way you can pass. Another way to pass the data is very simple. What I'm going to do, I'll go and create one more action in the data controller CS, and now I'm showing you that how you can create a dynamic type view. So here you see exactly the same product data dynamic kind of action, but rather than attaching the list of products to a view bag, what I'm doing, I'm passing that to the view. You can see here I'm passing that to the view over here. Line number 64, you may want to notice that in the previous example what we done, we attached LST products as a property to view bag, whereas here we are passing that as a parameter to view. Great. I'll again right click on the action and say that, hey, create a view for me. So I'll click on add view. Again, I'll choose mtb.model and click on add. So here you see that now to work with that, what I need to do, since I have not used the template and model, very first on the top, I need to define that, hey, that the data which I'm passing is the type dynamic, which you just saw that I have used that in the top in line number 1. And after that, it should be very simple as we did in the last example. I'll go here and say for each var a in model, which is here, and then a.name and a.price. Keep in mind again here that again here your IntelliSense will not work because this is a dynamic view. So when you create a view using the dynamic type or by passing the data using the view bag and view data, those kind of views are dynamic views and they don't, IntelliSense does not work here. Again, I can go and run this and you should be able to see the output. Great, so here we are seeing the output and it is perfectly fine. Now the last but not least, let me show you that how to work with the strongly typed view, which we just saw, but just to show you again, here you see what I'm doing. Again, I've created an action called product data and I'm passing the product here as we did in the dynamic type. But here's something very important you need to notice. When I'm adding the view, right click, I'll saying that add view, and here I'm not saying that templates should be empty, whereas I'm saying that templates should be list, and then I'm selecting the model also, which is product. What I'm doing here I am attaching the view to a strongly typed object called product. So the view which would get created would be the strongly typed view, and IntelliSense should work there. I'll go ahead and say add. Here you see that it has added in the top in line number 1. You see that it has added the model as the strongly typed object, not to the dynamic, which you can see in the line number 1. So this is a strongly typed object, not a dynamic type. And so this is a strongly typed view, and here completely your IntelliSense will work. So here I'll go model.name. You can see on your screen that IntelliSense is working. So this is how a strongly typed view works. If you are confused that which one is the strongly typed view, which one is the dynamic view, whenever on as the model you see some strongly typed object here or class here, you strongly type you are strongly typed here, that is a strongly typed view, and whenever you see a dynamic here, that is a dynamic view. So this is the way you can identify whether it's a strongly typed view or it is a dynamic view. Great, so we just covered different kinds of view also. Now let us see that how child action works. It is very important. So we have seen the action, right? What action does? It can return a string, it can return JSON, it can return, it can redirect to another action, or it can return a view. We have a provision of child action also in MVC. Child actions are the action methods can be invoked within a view. If you want to call an action inside a view, that is child action. So child actions are action method which can be invoked within the view. This is used to work with the data in the view, which are not related to the main action method. So if you want to bring data from more than one table to the strongly typed view, what you can do, you can create a child action and execute that action and get the data in the view. In SP.NET MVC, any action can be used as a child action. To use an action only as a child action and attribute with the child action only. So let us very quickly go and see that how child action works. For the child action, what I'm going to do, I'll just go here and add a method called current time. So here you see that we have these many methods. I added one method called here current time in line number 90, and then on top of that I'm saying that it is a child action only, so I can use it only inside a view. And what it is doing, it is returning a partial view. Okay, the partial view is the view which can be used with a view, and it is taking as a parameter datetime.now. Very simple. Now right click here and say, hey, add a view for me, and here you say that current time empty, and don't forget to select the option create a partial view. Here what I have done, I have selected the option create a partial view here, okay, and giving the view name as current time, and then click on add. So here what I have done, I have created a partial view, and then very quickly I'll go here and put this code. Again, it is a strongly typed view, so using the type date time, and then I'm just returning the current time. So here we have created a child action with a partial view. Now if we want to use this view on a main view, we can use it on any main view, and the way to use it on the main view is go to any main view. For example, I'm here in this product data, and I'll come here and I'll say that, hey, HTML action current time. Current time is the name of the action. You can call the child action from another controller as well. You can pass this as a second parameter. You can see that it is asking you for the route name and all. So here what I'm saying, action current time. Okay, so I'm using it on a main view. So let us go and see the product dynamics, and then with child action, I'm putting that just to differentiate. So very simple, what I have done, I created a action with attribute child action only, which is returning a partial view. I created a partial view here where I'm displaying the current time. Then on the main view, what I'm doing, I'm just calling the partial action using html.action, which is in line number 8. Now if we go ahead and run this, we should be able to get the current time, date and time there on that particular view. And here you go, here you see that we are seeing current time 4:09 p.m. and this reminds me that we are 10 minutes past the dedicated time, but that's okay, we'll go 6 minutes more. So here you see that the current time is 4:09 p.m. and we are able to use a current a partial view inside a view using the child action. So this was about the partial views and the child action which we just completed. Now areas are the smaller functional unit in ASP.NET MVC. Let us see the areas, that how areas works. What areas does, that areas are the smaller functional units in ASP.NET MVC. So when you have a big web application and want to put all the functionality in different folders, for example, you have a billing section, you have a checkout section, you have inventory section, all those sections should go in the different folder. You'll be creating areas. So an MVC application can have any number of areas. Each area has its own controllers, models, and views. Physically, area are put on the separate folders, and areas are just really managing big web applications. Very simple. Let me give you a very quickly area demo. So here I'll go. If I want to add an area, what I'll do here, that I'll go here and you see that I have a folder called area here. Areas, I should have a folder called areas here we don't have, that's fine. So we can go and create a new folders called area, or rather you can go here and say, hey, right click on your project, add, and here you can say, hey, add a new area for me. So right click on your project, say add new area. You can give an area name. Let us say I'm giving the area name as test. So here or I'm giving the area name, for example, as ecom or something. So here you see that here you can see area folder has been added to your project with a folder ecom, and it has its own controllers, and it has its own models, it has its own views. And now you can go ahead and add a controller here and start working with the areas. So areas are very simple to work with. So these are the areas. As a last demo of our application, I'm going to show you a scaffolding. Anyone who starts with ASP.NET MVC, they actually start with a scaffolding, and that is why I have kept that in the last. I hope you understood all these concepts, which will help you in getting started with MVC and getting deeper into MVC. But right now, before I move ahead, let me show you how I can work with a scaffolding. Here you see that I have a table here. I have a database called school in the local database server, and that got two tables called courses and department. This courses tables, if I go to the design of courses table, what it does, it depends on, it has a department ID, which is foreign key from the department table. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to work with these two tables, city and department, and see how it works using the scaffolding. Okay, so I'll go here and go to the models folder in my project. I'll right click, I'll say that, hey, add a new item. Right click on the models folder, add a new item. I'll go to the data tab. I'll go to the data tab and say select ADO.entity data model. I leave the default name to model 1, click on add. And here I have different options that either I want to start with designer from database or code first, model first. Today we are going to work with database first approach. So I'll select EF designer from database and click on next. It will ask me to, I can go ahead and create a new connection, and I'll give the server name, which is DJPC in my case, my database server name, and then I'll go and select enter database name, and I'm going to use school database. Then select test connection succeeded. So what I have done, I have given the server name, I have given the database name, and clicked on the test connection to verify whether I'm able to connect to the database or not. And I'm using the Windows authentication, and then I'll click on OK. So I have created a new connection, and then I'm leaving the connection string as school entities, and then click on next. I'll say that I want to use entity framework 6, and then I'll click on next. It will ask me to select tables. I can select all the tables, but here I'm interested only in department and course. So I selected those two tables, and then leaving the namespace name as a school model and clicking on finish. So here we are using a scaffolding with database first approach. So here you see that we got created at EDMX, which is showing that department and courses are related to each other with 1:many relationship. That is good. Now let us go ahead and rebuild the application. So I rebuild the application here. Now I'll go and create a new controller. I'll say that, hey, add a new controller from me. And this time I'm going to use MVC controller with views using entity framework. I'm selecting the option 3 because I have created a data model using entity framework and I want to use that. So I'm selecting the third option, and then I'll say add. Here it is asking me for the model class, and I want to work with the model class course. I select the course from here. Then it is asking me for the data context class, which in this case I have only one data context class, it is school entities, which we just created. I'll select that. I'll leave the default everything, and I'll say the controller name as courses controller, and I click on add. So since we have used the scaffolding, what would happen is that Visual Studio will create all the codes for me. Here you see that it has created every the code which is required to perform CRUD operation for me, and at the same time what it has done inside the courses folder, it has created all the views required also, which you can see here. If I go to the index.chhtml, you can see that it is using the strongly typed views. In the line number 1, you can see it is using models.course. Then it is just navigating or iterating through all the item in that and displaying the course ID and all that. So now if I go and run this application, here you see that I should have all the courses listed here. You see that all the courses are listed here on the screen, right? If I want to add a new course, I'll click on create new. I selected a new, create new from the top, and here you see that department ID. It is populating since department this course depends on the department table in primary key foreign key in the foreign key relationship. What it is doing, it is taking all the data from the department table and displaying us to choose, and this is the power of ASP.NET MVC. I'll select this. I can give some credit, let us say 6. I'll give some title, for example MVC, and course ID, give some course ID and create. And here you see that we are able to create a course called MVC. I'll go to the database and say that, hey, select the course. And here you see that we just created a course called MVC over here. In the database, we can verify that. So using the scaffolding, it is very easy. And if your concepts are clear, like what is a strongly typed view, what is dynamic type view, how XN returns, how data goes from XN to view, and all that, for you, the code which got created here should not be confusing. You should be able to understand, okay, this is a strongly typed view which is using this type. You'll be able to understand everything. Yeah, so that's it from my side. We are already 20 minutes ahead of the time. Before I go, I would like to draw your attention to that everyone who is attending today has an opportunity to go ahead and download our free trial from infragistics.com/product/ultimate/download. If you have any query, or you may reach out to sales-india@infragistics.com. Thank you so much once again, everyone, for joining today's webinar. I am Dhananjay Kumar, who was presenting you ASP.NET MVC, and today we covered all the basic concepts. In the future webinar, we will be going deeper into ASP.NET MVC and covering all the architectures like repository pattern, inversion of control, onion architecture, etc. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's webinar, and I wish each one of you, on behalf of Infragistics, happy Diwali to you and your family. Enjoy it and be successful. Thank you so much, everyone. Now I am going to stop the recording and take the questions, and you will have a recording of this webinar available by Tuesday. Thank you so much, everyone.